Hello, this is the Culture and Justice Reform podcast, episode 7, and with Sean B.W. Parker and Emma Wells, who has returned in her new flat, which you'll see the background of in a minute. Very exciting, but not as exciting, possibly, as our this week's guest, Cherrie Nichol. Cherrie Nichol, who is the coordinator for IPP in Action. IPP means imprisonment for public protection, which was a sentence introduced in around 2004, 2005, she'll correct us, by Mr. David Blunkett and the new Labour government, where people were banged up and they weren't let out, they didn't have a release date until they'd done courses or proven themselves to society, but they weren't able to get courses, etc., etc. After 20 years, nearly, there are still thousands of people left inside. It's an ongoing disgrace. They're talking about it in Ministry of Justice all the time. And we're going to talk to Cherrie about it now. She's a wonderful person, part of a wonderful committee, IPP in Action. Cherrie, would you like to say hello first?
Hi, my name's Cherrie Nichol. I represent the IPP Justice for All. I work with Great in Action. I've worked with as well. So we are groups of campaigners that ultimately want the same outcome. Okay, so my brother is who has currently served 18 years, and I'm campaigning for him and advocating for other people as well.
Yeah, fantastic, thank you. And we got a lot of little bits to get into with this, with the scalpel of Emma. So what do you think about this, Emma? You got any questions?
Well, yeah, firstly, Cherrie, you just mentioned that it's your brother that you're supporting. You said that he's done 18 years. It's actually 16 years over tariff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we discussed the other day that one of the reasons for this is because of the lack of courses that has been offered. Is that still on? What are the courses? You know, what's the reasons for the stalling?
There was COVID, which was the 2-year period of hangover, for that. And there was also some opinions that to say this is, if people would say this might happen or that might happen, you know, into letting him out or not. So that was a disadvantage, preempting what my brother might do, being incarcerated for so long, upheld him longer. Access to courses, you see, when they're IPP and they haven't got a date to come home, what happens is they're not going to be in the firing line for courses, because little Jack Jones has got a year to do. He's going to get that course because he's going home in a year. So ultimately, there's a bit of sufferance because they aren't able to fill the courses because they haven't got a tariff. So everybody else gets in front of them, and this is a reason for them not going on the courses. Not because they're not always there; it's because they haven't got an urgency to go on the course, if that makes sense. And a lot of that does happen, Emma. So it could be unlucky, or you could have to be moved to another prison where they do the course. But again, you're adding 2 years, 5 years, 10 years on your sentence, aren't you? So it just prolongs the agony and incarceration of mental health, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And mental health is something that I really do want to speak about, because long-term prisoners are deemed the highest at risk from long-term mental health, and a further higher risk to society on the release. I mean, your brother's done 18 years. How is he getting along with that? Is there any support there for him, or is it pretty much non-existent?
He's doing all right. He's progressing. He's engaging, but you can understand if he's been in that long, and he's engaged and he gets nothing for it, and he gets promised to jump over this hoop and that hoop, and engages further and gets nothing for it. It's the barriers keep widening of where he needs to be. So although he's engaging, he's finding it difficult to be sat in a room. I could be sat in my bedroom like this for 20 hours a day. And of course, in that time, with no access to the outside world, you've only got staff coming to your door or not coming to your door to let you out. That you
This is the
right.
first.
Yes, so hopefully
That's happened eventually.
hopefully Cherrie will come back in a second. What's your position on the IPP, Emma, from a personal perspective? Do you have any experience or?
Yeah, I know a lot of IPP partners of IPP and loved ones of IPP prisoners. It's very cruel, incredibly cruel what's happened to these folk. As I said, of Haverick prison, a lot of the guys up there are on the way out now, sex offenders. One of the things that I wanted to discuss with Cherrie was sex offenders. Obviously, once they get into Haverick, they're on the way out. Yeah, this is the forward run. Cherrie.
Just have to stop you there, Emma. I mean, you just sort of said that once you get to Haverick, you're on the way out.
Yeah.
What does that? What does that actually mean? Kind of according to our audience, who aren't going to know what Haverick means.
So category D is where you're given opportunities to be reintroduced into the society, back in society. They give you day releases. You get to spend weekends with your family. As I said, I'm not a sex offenders prisoner, and that's completely different to Cherrie and her background. But what I did want to discuss further with you later, Cherrie, was something we touched on the other day, was that there are opportunities for people to progress through the prison system by decategorising, if you will, and getting down to a category. That's something that's been offered to your brother, or is it something that's just been a constant stalwart? Or
I don't think he's had them opportunities. I think there was talked about of Cat C. You see, apologies, I got cut off before. So the issue is, because he's been in 18 years, then he's going to Cat C, then he's category D. It's going to be 22 years by the time he comes home.
I find it fascinating that his index offence was only for 2 years, and yet he's gone so far over tariff, and he's still in category B prison. And as we discussed the other day, he's on enhanced, and it has been for a significant period of time. It's just outrageous that this person is still where he is now. I find it extraordinary.
Yeah, and this is the thing, Emma. So if there's no argument really, because it's been enhanced. So if you're enhanced and you're a model prisoner, you should be given those opportunities. So when it comes to parole, there's many arguments to be had about progression, and there's got to be some give and take somewhere. That's what I'm trying to say. There's got to be some give and take. If you can be enhanced, then you must satisfy some sort of risk.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sort of curious, just about the original kind of intention of the sentence, 2005-ish, with Mr. David Blunkett, who at the time they were saying, how do we stop people committing crime? Let's not give them a date until they're out. Okay, you get the logic. It's the kind of thing you come up with in sixth form to stop these problems. And that's what the new Labour government often did. They come up with these sixth form ideas and put them into action. And now he's apologised to 3 times over the years. He doesn't seem to know what to do about it except apologise. He's retired. What do you think they were trying to get towards? Do you think it was a good idea? And what degree do you think it's just been a complete fuck up?
Basically, are you talking to me?
Yeah, you should.
Basically, I think I agree that they had to address the situation of crime, but they could have done by giving them an actual tariff and giving them targets to maintain to get to the end of that tariff, and give them a proper tariff like everybody else, not something that they've got to do a minimum of, if that makes sense, and then back up the courses to facilitate the behavioural issues that got them in there in the first place. And they could have done many of than what they did. Because yes, they did mess up, because obviously ultimately they've all been in than they should have been, and it's not that we're saying that they didn't deserve to go to prison, but for the minority of the small crimes that were undertaken and that were committed, the time served wouldn't warrant, as we know, what they've actually all done. So it was an absolute joke, a mess, and to be abolished, it's still kind of running, isn't it?
Well, exactly. So, Emma?
Yeah, something that I feel very strongly about is obviously the loved ones of those who've been sent to prison. And 18 years, as I keep saying, is an extraordinary amount of time for your brother to have been there. I worked it out, and journey time alone from your home to where he is currently placed is at 140 miles each way.
Yeah.
How often you visit, I don't know. I don't know the back ins and outs, but most of the people who I support are weekly visitors, if monthly, at least once a month. Financial cost to you alone, and the additional stress that this has put on Christmases, birthdays, Easter, whatever you've been celebrating. If you want to just give me a little bit of insight into how that's affected you.
Yeah, so I go and see my brother once a month if I can. Every 3 weeks if he's struggling, because I go to support his mental health as well. So I'll go to sort of like buddy him up and lift him up. That's what helps him. For me as a sister, because I've done so long on the sentence, I've actually missed out on 18 years of my brother's life. Now, don't particularly need to mention it, but my brother was separated from a young age when we were care system, so that was more than enough trauma not getting to know my brother at a young age. And now as an adult, I'm separated from the only person that's half of me, and I'm probably, and I have been for the last 18 years of his life since he's been incarcerated, a mother to him. And that's really difficult because we haven't got our parents' support really. So it's hard because it feels like to me that it's a child. Financially, I pay for his canteen and things that he needs. I buy my brother's boxer shorts, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to buy my lingerie, but I buy his boxers, his socks. I buy everything. So when you have any choices, as such, it does. But for me to describe that you might like and get the right socks, it's laughable because we'll laugh about it later on in life, but I facilitate that he has enough socks and boxes. And the canteen thing, I never really used to give him his money for his canteen. And then I sort of had to educate myself on what would happen if you don't give your loved ones money each week. It's a bit like being in school and that person doesn't have anything, and that person has, they don't have the latest trainers, or they don't have this, because now it's gone from uniformed to your personal identity of wearing your clothes, which is great for self-esteem, but it's not good for those families who can't afford it, and it's not good for those prisoners who don't have the funds to buy. It's absolutely awful. But I cured the problem of my brother having to borrow off people, so if you wanted to borrow some coffee, say, you would have to make sure you bought somebody 3 Mars bars the week after. It's called like debt you would accumulate. So to keep my brother from having any arguments in there and having any fights or whatever over a Twix, which does happen, I would make it legal by giving him canteen. Then he's been fine because his self-esteem rose, because he didn't have to ask anybody for anything. He's got his own. But my brother would be the first person to give you a shirt off his back if you didn't have, because he understands he's been.
I get that. Thank you for that. But it's something that not very few people actually take into consideration, is that the burdens that are placed on people who are in this situation through no fault of your own. Absolutely not. So it's something that you're very passionate about. Sean, you want to say something? No?
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking about his own sort of situation there, and just last week, the two of us and the rest of the IPP kind of committee were up in London, and trying to campaign to the Houses of Parliament and all that. Mr. Davey, I think you spoke to an MP, didn't you? You went into the House of Commons and you were doing some lobbying. What happened there?
We spoke to James Daly, so Clara White, who I work closely alongside, because her brother's in the same establishment as mine. Her MP, James Daly, was the first MP to get it into Parliament. So they tried for 2 years solidly to get this into Parliament, and nobody was having it. Everybody tried. And James Daly got it into Parliament, and he works on the Justice Select Committee. And he managed...
sorry to interrupt you, Cherrie. What exactly did he get into Parliament?
He made it political. He made it political. The IPPs to get consideration for to end of the sentence, to resentence, to do something. Yeah, to do something about it. It has to be because it's been abolished and it's been a long lingering backlash of, we've lost like 78 IPP and probably counting that we don't know of due to suicide. Now that might be within the establishments or on the outside when they can't cope with that much mental health and backlash that they just can't manage, or they don't get the help. So with that being said, it really had to get Parliament. So we were there the other day to meet the MP to speak about it because we want change.
So what did he say?
So he was saying that we had to wait to the 28th of November to see what those recommendations were going to be and what was going to be done about the papers that we put in, changes that we want to be made. They decide how they're going to approach it and what they're going to do. They have to answer us within 60 days, sorry. That would be the 28th of September it went in. We would hopefully get our answer on the 28th of November, providing they don't make you say, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to wait another 2 weeks. But that is when they should really reapply, and we'll get some answers,
Okay. And so what was actually, what was the details of the request you put in? Can you remember?
It was to resentence.
Just that, or was there anything else apart of that? Just the resentencing of all the IPPs?
Yeah, it was a multitude of resentencing and having plans. We've got the recalls I think, to be fair, we couldn't give them too much at once. We've got to deal with one thing at a time. So we've got to deal with resentencing, then we've got to deal with the licence conditions and the rates that they're recalled and what they're recalled for. So I think it's a long, lengthy process, but it's a bit like digging a hole and digging a bit better, a bit more further.
It is. It was so interesting what you just said there. Sorry, Emma, I keep kind of jumping in here because I just kind of want to be clear to Cherrie on. You had a couple of different points there. You said do the resentencing, and you also said something else as well, but there were separate points, and I want to try and get to what they actually mean in the minds of the public, because the public are saying, don't let them out, they're all going to go and kill everybody, right?
Yeah.
So what do you tell them? What do you tell them?
So what I would say is the IP, when it was introduced, you never had a tariff for a crime that you committed. So after lingering in the system, 118 years, some have been 11 years, some people have been, in the system for pinching a bike. And we're talking about minor crimes. We're not talking about serious crimes here. All we want is the fair sentence to fit the crime. Now that's expired and gone well over. And this has created a massive mental health epidemic. We have to clean up. These guys have got the mental strength and agility anymore to think straight or do anything, or engage or anything, because they've really, really suffered in the incarceration with no particular pathway plans that has been put in. So that's what the act is about, and we want to change that. So I bring a fair sentence of what they've done, and that's what everybody else gets. When I'm talking about the recalls, it's when the IPP is allowed, into the public.
I didn't catch that. Sorry, can you say it again?
So when somebody's allowed out, when they've finished their IPP, they're allowed out. They are still on license for 99 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So when that person, I've heard stories recently, and it's absolutely atrocious that taxpayers' money is going on this. So just recently, a friend of mine's son was taken back in to HMP, wherever, because he was playing on his PlayStation. Right. So taxpayers' money, is it £47,000? It's gone up now a year. Who played on the PlayStation? Why another 2 weeks in the hospital? They don't have them rules. Was it worth a year? Not really.
Absolutely agree with that, of course. I've had to talk to probation about quite a lot of these issues, because all the prisoners say, I got kind of called back in for that kind of reason, or because they didn't turn up to the appointment and whatnot. The probation officers turn back to me and say, people never tell the truth about the reason they're recalled. So we have that argument going on, and then we have that argument going on too. And you guys know me, I always try and be fair, right? Even to the government. So it's like
again, I get it. but I be more inclined to believe the guy who's sat in the cell over probation. I would personally.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. What was that, Cherrie? You were trying to say something there?
I was just saying, absolutely. So that's the recall for the general public to understand. When you come out of the IPP and they give you an opportunity, they put you in a hostel to reset when it's called, and you're bound by the rules of signings and things like that. The recall is if you go back into prison, you're bound by these conditions, and you can go back in any time. So that's the recalls that have been talking about. People understand that, that you're on your life for 99 years. Now, just before I go off track, because you know when I go like that, they say 5 years you can remain on licence, or 10 years, and then the IPP is fully taken off. So you're treated fairly, which you should be in society. Like, say if you, I don't know, say you was drink driving or something, you would just get the sentence like everybody else. Not that you do that, you would be back into the usual, treated like everybody else fairly, rather than judged on you've got an IPP. So I hope that's some questions of what so people understand what we're talking about.
It has leads me on to this next one, actually. I want, obviously 18 years ago, your brother, the person who was sent to prison, is not the person he is today. So the person who's coming out is unlikely to recommit that crime anyway. You know, a long time passed. You know, he was a kid when it happened. So as you've just said, then to have that license conditions hanging over you for the rest of your life, that drain on a person's mental, it's just it's extraordinary. It is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I wanted to return as well to what we were discussing earlier, but it's got out of my head now with changing questions. What were we discussing before we got cut off? Can you remember?
Sorry, that's my fault probably, but you know. So all right, I'm just going to jump in again then. So here we are with the person that's been released. We could talk about, you know, Tommy, or we could talk about an IPP about to be released. I've got a lot of pals on IPPs, which is why I'm so passionate about it.
Okay.
He kind of comes out, it's he in general. And how does the public, how does your next door neighbour and Emma's next door neighbour be reassured that their compassionate person who lives next door in Justice Reform Us aren't being stupid and they're not going to go and hurt people? How do we make sure they don't go and hurt people? How do we make sure that? How do we reassure them?
Well, the thing is, I was speaking to her today in the car, okay? Anybody who goes to prison, anybody, and commits a crime is always, you know, can always go and commit another crime. So there's always a risk that they might offend in anything. So we constantly, you know, scrutinise IPP and treat them the rest of the time because they made a mistake like everybody else, but they're treated differently. And either they treat justify why they're in there, or they just, you know. So it's like anything, isn't it? If you gave somebody a chance, if they reoffended, then they'll be punished for it. But you can't go around thinking, oh, well, what if Jack Jones knocks on the door when he's not allowed to speak to such and such? Because we don't know, we don't have those answers. But anybody who's been incarcerated so cruelly for so long would be thinking long and hard about doing anything. In actual fact, I have got proof. I have done interviews with people. And do you know what a lot of people will say when they're on licence, when they're IPP? They say that they don't go out the house because if there's an argument that kicks off, they'll get told, and that's how they live their life. They don't go out.
Yeah. I've been saying for a very long time, there's 2 crimes that I committed in my life where I would have gone to prison for an awfully long time.
You keep mentioning that. I don't know why you keep saying that, Emma, but is it like...
But I don't think it's a bad thing to say, though, is it? Everybody has done something. Everybody has done something, haven't they? And you know, they've committed the crime, they've gone to prison, they've done the sentence, they come out, and of course you need to protect the public. I get that completely. I really, really do. But can you do any more? Can you?
That's the balance, isn't it? I was sort of thinking sometimes, and I was particularly thinking about this as us guys were up in London last week, and I was, you know, trying to think it through in a mature way as opposed to a passionate way, if you know what I mean, trying to balance it out. And how would it be? What would you say, Cherrie, about the idea to have the probation and the police staff who were willing to be retrained to be mentors of the people being released, these IPP people. So they're being looked after, not in a patronizing way, let's be very sure about that, but in a way that they can call at any time and say, I'm struggling, I really want those drugs, well, don't have those fucking drugs, or whatever else needs to be told to them, whatever they've agreed to do. Is that a good idea to get them to have this mentorship, or am I being kind of naive?
I think right support needs to be put in place. I feel like saying something right, but there's no support for you to, and there's loads of pointers that might make you fail. Like, I think there needs to be more support and better pathway plans for people, whether it be police that you engage with, mental health services, medical professionals, community officers, whatever. You know, that they need those relationships, but they need to be trust as well, because you can imagine people being incarcerated so much and been let down, they would really struggle to form relationships. And if you look at lots of people in the system, they're heavily traumatized, so they find it difficult to engage because they must be suspicious that something happened to them because they build up that wish. So yeah, there could be a lot more done, and it would be a damn sight cheaper than keeping them in at taxpayers' money at £47,000 a year. Absolutely.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's coming to an end now. We've got only a couple of minutes left. Have you got any more observations, Emma, you want to chip in before it's done?
I just wanted to briefly touch on Charlie Bronson. Obviously, it's something that is very topical. Yeah, incredibly topical. It's going to be made public. You know, the guy's been in there for a hell of a long time for nothing, particularly against the public. He's sitting on his hands now. He can't wait for his mum to glory. Do you think it's going to happen? Are you passionate? Is it something that you guys are behind? And
hang on. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma. I don't know. Can you?
Oh gosh, it was jailed years ago. It was something of nothing crime, jailed, and then when he was sent to prison, he's attacked prison officers.
Charles Bronson, right? You're talking about Charles Bronson. Okay, he's too dangerous.
Sorry.
He didn't actually do anything on the outside, you mean, or he didn't do anything particularly?
He had an index offence that's put him in there, but then when he got in there, he revolted against the whole system. Lost the plot a little bit. It's Cat A, I think he's in now. He's in like some Wakefield prison or something. But he's been afforded this public parole because that's what's happening now, isn't it? The board and I just wanted to know what the IPP Committee in Action, what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I think that the guy's 70 years old now. I mean, I think you need to give him a chance. He's done his time. He's probably the one of the I've ever known for little crime.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Because they've taken all his life for what he might do. And this is the thing, we're preempting what people might do, and this is why they're still in there. And this is wrong. People that are actually killing people or whatever, running people over, they're getting 6 years, but then for good behaviour they're getting 3. 3 years. I'm sorry, but I don't agree with it when people like my brother are incarcerated and Charles Bronson for minor crimes and have done their time.
Yeah. No.
This is the right.
Yeah. What's your thought, Sean?
When it comes to Mr. Bronson, Salvador, I think he now calls himself Salvador. Seems like changing his name a bit. Is that kind of inside? He's become a celebrity, of course, because he's done this to himself. He wants to be a celebrity. So if he does come out, basically he's going to be a more rich celebrity. So it's not really so much about prison for him as the thousands of others I'm more concerned about, because he's going to be fine. He's designed himself. I want to be kind about him if I ever meet him. He's an attention seeker. Perhaps he'll agree. I don't know. I've asked the guys at Inside Time. You do know him more than I do.
Yeah.
But he's not it's not the IPPs I'm talking about who really don't look for the same kind of coverage, if we put it that way.
It was somebody I pulled out to just want to choose somebody famous, somebody that people could perhaps identify with, and identify that he's been handed that sentence in the same way as your brother. And like you said,
has he? I didn't actually know he was an IPP. I didn't realise that. He's got a bit more sympathy now.
Well, it's just so people can have a bit of clarity about how these things work, and obviously got himself in bother inside, and that's why it's gone on for so long.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
that doesn't happen with.
We're coming to an end now. Thank you very much, Cherrie, and we'll hopefully get your colleagues in the committee on soon as well. Perhaps we'll do a four-way or do a part 2 of what happens with next, because these things are ongoing stories, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate
No,
that.
it's brilliant meeting you, Cherrie.
Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time on the Culture and Justice Reform podcast. We're actually finishing it in a humane way this week. It's pretty impressive. All right.
Fabulous, guys.
Bye-bye.
Check
Bye,
it out.
everybody. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Okay, bye. Bye. Bye.